Hello, I'm Mantastic and Fantastic, and today I'm going to be discussing the new Final Fantasy buffs that are going to be implemented due to the fact that Yama P decided to roll a bunch on the Final Fantasy cloud. So as a little bit of a background, Final Fantasy has a new game out, so in part of that celebration, the creator slash big head honcho for Gung Ho decided to roll a rag machine multiple times. Whatever he rolled, he would buff, and those buffs are obviously random in nature because we don't know what he's going to roll. So certain cards that didn't need a buff will be buffed. Certain cards that should have been buffed didn't get a buff. So some people are disappointed, but you need to look at it like this. It's a free buff that wouldn't have occurred otherwise, so just take it as something extra. And as for when these buffs will actually come to North America, I do not know. I'm just going to presume it will happen before the Final Fantasy collab goes away because that just makes good money sense from their point of view. So, basically, he rolled a bunch of times and he buffed essentially the cards that came out. So, one of his 6-star rolls was Noctis, and they buffed Noctis by increasing his leader skill so it ramps up at one combo lower and maxes out at a higher multiplier. So instead of being maxed out at 81 times attack, he's now 110.25 times. So significantly higher damage. It also means you need less combos to achieve damage from beforehand. So say you made 5 combos before, now that you can make 4 combos to achieve the same multiplier. So it's a pretty strong buff overall. Like, Noctis was already good, now he's just better. Like, with this higher multiplier, you potentially have the chance to not need to run a damage enhancing sub, so you can free up that spot for utility or more orb changing, so on and so forth. So powerful all around, and it wasn't really needed because there were other 6-stars like Cloud who could have benefited a lot more. Next is Lightning, and Lightning actually received quite a few buffs. Most notably, she gained a God typing, she gained 500 health, and an additional Light Row and Skill Lock Resist. And she also got a buff to her leader skill, and her leader skill now allows you to have higher recovery. So instead of 2 times recovery for matching 5 connected light orbs, it's now 2.25 times. So higher recovery means you just heal faster, and you're even more likely to take the health badge because with that additional 500 HP, the health badge with dual leaders will give you basically an additional 1,150 in essence, because like the whole buff gave you 1,000 more health for 2 leaders and 15% more health, so you gained 150, like 1,150 more health. So that's quite significant because it means you may be able to survive attacks that you normally couldn't beforehand, and it just means she's a more durable leader. Furthermore, the addition of the Skillbind Resist greatly alleviates team building constraints because that was one of her biggest flaws, was that you would struggle to achieve 100% Skillbind Resist, and now you should have no problems whatsoever. The extra Light Row is just more damage, and that's just making her 156 times attack even more potent. And last but not least, this God typing allows her to be used on the new Raw Dragon teams as a potential sub, as a bad Dark Kali. I say bad because she has no additional color coverage, and she just has less synergistic awakenings for a Raw Dragon team. Most notably, the rows just go to complete waste. Next is Tifa, and Tifa gained perhaps the most underwhelming buffs of any of the 6-stars. She gained additional stats, which is nice, of course. However, her leader skill was simply changed to be able to proc off 6 connected orbs instead of 7, and you still have the exact same attack multiplier, but you have far more recovery. Now, Tifa was, like, she transforms the board into a 7x6, which allows you to make more combos and have more damage potential. However, you would always pair Tifa with a different leader. Most notably, you'd pair with, say, Xiumin, DQXQ, Lightning, so on and so forth. And the fact of the matter is, like, she didn't gain additional damage, and that would have been nice because 5 times, even when paired with, say, Lightning's, what is it? Like, Lightning's significantly higher multiplier, I don't recall, it's like 12 times and a bit, 12 and a half times. Plus Tifa, like, it's still not that much damage, and it would have been nicer if they had buffed her attack value. However, the additional recovery, making it so she's 5 times recovery, can significantly help out Xiumin and DQXQ teams, because now you do have 5 times recovery when paired with those leaders, so those teams who would normally struggle for recovery have more than enough now. So it is alright, but it's kind of disappointing overall. Next is Van, and Van essentially gained 4 more awakenings, with really just the 2 light rows being of significance. and his leader skill is insignificant to change. So the problem with Van beforehand was he had 2 prongs, 2 rows, and that basically meant he basically had either 2 prongs or 2 rows. You're rarely using a team that needs both of those awakenings. So with the addition of 2 more light rows, he now actually has 4 light rows essentially and a skill boost. So now he makes a respectable sub on mono light teams because that's a lot of passive damage. Furthermore, his active still generates a row of light orbs at the top, so you still gain value there because you hoard light orbs at the bottom, it makes the row at the top. Pretty useful. Still has synergy with Wedding Akachi and New Year's Hanzo, but he's still not the greatest sub overall just because you're overriding orbs in the bottom row, so those light orbs hoarded there are being overwritten. Next is Shen To, and Shen Toto gained 1 more Dark Row and 3 brand new Wood Row Awakenings. So this is kind of strange, he now has 9 Row Awakenings, and it's basically screaming at you to use Cameo as an inherit. Probably as an inherit on top of Shen Toto, because Cameo and Shen Toto alone will grant you 3.1 times attack bonus. So you're probably going to have other subs with rows, and you're going to have an amazing amount of burst potential with that Gemstone Princess inherit. So it's interesting. It's pretty much just a niche situation, and you'd run Shantoto if you want a lot of passive damage, especially if you have Cameo as an inherit on your team. Next is Terra, and Terra gained a single skill boost and an insignificant change to her leader skill. And that's a little disappointing because she basically just gained a skill boost. No one's running her as a leader, so the skill boost has very little value. She was pretty strong beforehand, but if she had gained maybe a slight buff to her active skill or even just base stat, that would have been so much more powerful. You still have a nice active of light and fire column generation, so Tsubaki, Leyland, or most of Tsubaki, the new Ilm, they have at least favorable active usage with her, but they would have liked to have a better stat stick as well to go along with those nice awakenings. Bartz gained a third 2-prong and passive 15% light damage reduction. Now, the Bartz is actually a very powerful card because he spawns a column of wood on the rightmost and leftmost columns, so you're guaranteed 10 wood orbs. So on the Color Cross Akala team, you're guaranteed to have your 180 times activation because you guaranteed 10 orbs. In addition, on Kaede teams, you actually generate 10 wood orbs, provided you don't override your hearts, which can be dangerous, but those triple 2-prongs have beautiful synergy on the 2-prong oriented Kaede team. However, outside of those 2 teams, Bart still doesn't have that much usage, mostly because there's not many good wood 2-prong teams in existence at the moment. Next is Zidane, and Zidane was not a good card to start. A 2-prong and time extend doesn't change that fact. His leader skill is insignificant. It's basically trying to put a band-aid on a wound, and it's not really helping solve the problem because Zidane was not helpful, mostly because his Skyfall active generated wood and light orbs, so you're diluting your Skyfall chance so it's not that high. Maybe you could run him as a slightly better base for skill inheritance, it does have reasonably offensive awakenings, but aside from that, it's not going to be used just because it has such a weak base active, in my opinion. Next is Titus, and Titus gained a total of 5 water rows and a skill boost. So now Titus actually makes quite a reasonable base sub for skill inheritance because his active is okay, it is a damage enhance to say the least, and it's a small damage enhance, but at least it provides haste, but you can easily inherit something on top of it. Furthermore, 5 water rows is not that easy to come by, so that's a lot of passive damage for your mono water team, so it makes a lot stronger base sub for skill inheritance. Renoa perhaps gained the largest buff of any monster in the Final Fantasy collab because she gains a Recover Bind and Skill Bind Resist, so that greatly improves her utility and defensive capabilities. Her active was buffed from a 3 to a 4 turn Bind Clear, and her leader skill now can cap out at 8 times to form 64 times with dual leaders. So now she is essentially one of the strongest utility water card options available. You can clear binds passively with your Recover Bind Awakening, you can remove 4 turns with your active, and you can actually use her as a leader and pair with Sarasvati, because Sarasvati is a glass cannon 100 times leader, so 10 times per leader, and Renoa is 8 times. So Renoa plus Sarasvati is 80 times. Probably enough damage in most cases. You do have lots of nice orb enhances on Renoa, so that does have nice synergy with the Skyfall mechanic from Sarasvati. Furthermore, since Renoa is bind immune, you can abuse that in lots of dungeons where your leader will be bound because you don't get bound. Furthermore, you don't have to run any type of bind clear because you have a way to deal with it. So this actually opens up a lot of doors for Renoa owners because now you have the option to pair of Sarasvati and form a hard-hitting glass cannon leader because 80 times is still very powerful. And last but not least is Amo, and I don't know why. Like, it's unfortunate this card was rolled so much because it was a bad 4-star to begin with. It's still it's not that good at 4-star still. Like, it has 15% damage reduction to Dark and Wood, niche uses at best, but their active is unfortunate. Like, 2 turns, it's basically a 12-turn cooldown for 2 turns of haste. But I'm certain you can find a more powerful active on almost any other card for your team. So, unless you desperately need that 2 turns of haste, there's not much use for Amo. And it's just a weak card overall, unfortunately. Like, if they had buffed different 4-stars, maybe they could have seen more value, but it's unfortunate it was this one. So, in conclusion, the Final Fantasy collab did receive numerous buffs from Yama P's rolling. They don't necessarily hit all the right cards. Some of the buffs are lackluster, but some of them are quite powerful. So, just take it as is. Like, it's a bonus that we never would have had. So let me know which of these buffs you are most excited about in the comments below. This whole article will be linked in the description, so take a look there in case you want to read the thoughts, in case I skimmed over them too quickly. Have a mantastic day, and happy puzzling!